So I've got quite a few books that I want to talk about today, and these are going to range from I'm probably going to DNF this book because it's so bad to yay, read this book. So come and join me and find out which is which. Hi, my name's Mel. Welcome back to Bookish Brummy. I like to review books, and every week I do a video where I review all of the books that I've just read in the last week. And I'm normally following a reading prompt, which I normally set at the start of the month, and then I do that for the rest of the month. So my reading prompt at the moment is where I can only read books that have been written by authors who have a forename or a surname that begins with a K. Now, the reason I did this is just because I noticed on my shelves that actually K was like the most popular letter in either the forename or the surname, and I also wanted a bit of an excuse to read some of my Stephen King books. So if you'd like to see any of the books that I've already reviewed this month, you can find that in the K is May playlist, which is available. Okay, so when I left you last week, I had just started reading Florence Knapp's The Names. Now, this was published last year in 2025, and there's been loads and loads of noise about it on the internet, and it's like gone in loads of bestsellers lists. So I was really excited to read this, and I thought the premise sounded really good. So this is like contemporary fiction, and basically the general gist is that a name can influence the type of person that you become or who you are. So I had said last week that I didn't feel that the story was matching the synopsis exactly, but that I was still enjoying the story, but I would talk more about it when I sort of got round to reviewing it. So we'll do that now. So basically, it says after 1987, in the aftermath of a great storm, Cora sets out with her 9-year-old daughter to register the birth of her son. Her husband intends for her to follow a long standing family tradition and call the baby after him. But when faced with this decision, Cora hesitates. Going against his wishes is a risk that will have consequences. But is it right for her child to inherit his name from generations of domineering men? The choice she makes in this moment will shape the course of their lives. So that's sort of, there's like a little bit more to the synopsis, but yeah, the general gist I think is that how a name can shape you. And I think that the premise is actually a really interesting idea, so at the beginning of the book in 1987, where he's just a baby, she obviously has to make a choice about what to name him. But in order so that we can see all the different outcomes that may have happened, we end up with 3 different timelines. So we have a timeline that's going through the book where the child is called after the father. We have one where the child is named after his sister, like the name that his sister would like to call him. And then we have a timeline where the child is named after what the mother would like to call him. And then we basically visit the son, sort of, I say the son, the chapter's called after what the son is called, but we follow him in each of these timelines roughly every 7 years of his life, so we can see, who he is becoming as a person. And I would say that all does match the synopsis, but I feel like that the name is just a catalyst really for sort of what what initially kind of like happens in the home, I suppose. And I feel like anything could have been the catalyst for what happened in the home. The fact that it just happened to be the name on the day that the child was named at the registry office, I kind of feel is neither here nor there once you start getting through the story. And what I mean by that is this story really is about domestic violence. So if you don't want to read things about domestic violence or abusive relationships, this book is not going to be for you, because that's essentially what it's about. And I would say as we go into each sort of set of 7 years of these boys' lives, depending on which timeline we're in, really I feel like what is shaping him and his personality is how much exposure he has had to domestic violence, um, and what support he may have had outside of the home to deal with that. So, yeah, I feel that this is not really necessarily about the name. This is more about different timelines that examine the effect of domestic violence. But I would also say that even though the chapters are named after the name of the son, so I don't know, let's just say you have like name 1. We go into like name 1 chapter when he's like about 14. A lot of that chapter is not necessarily about the boy, like the son. It's about the mother, and it's about his sister. And I feel that there's actually like three main characters in this book. So there's the son, the sister, and the mother, essentially. But it's all just happening under the banner of the name of the son, like what's happening in that chapter and what's happening in their lives. But I actually really feel that this story, in some respects, is more about the mother than it is about the son, and sort of either, you know, what her children think of her, or what, you know, how she's coping with domestic violence. So I suppose that's where I feel like this book kind of deviates from what I thought it was about, because I think that the name is neither here nor there. Like, it's called the names, and this catalyst at the start of the book happens over what the child is called, but I don't think it's actually the name that's really shaping who this child is becoming in any of these timelines. It's really about how much exposure he's had to domestic violence, and we're also looking, you know, how it's sort of shaping his sister and the mother to a certain extent. Now, I think that the author has written the part about the domestic violence really well, because it's sort of subtle, you know, the subtle kind of manipulation from that kind of relationship, when somebody's outside the house with their partner, and then like inside the house, you know, and the kind of mental and emotional bullying that goes on. And I have to admit, like, these parts of the book are really hard to read, but I did think that they were done really, really well. And I think that from the sufferer, like the mother, who is the person who's sort of suffering the domestic abuse, I think that this story is done really, really well, and I think that she's researched it really well as well. Like, there's sort of a point in the story where they kind of mention that it takes somebody who is in an abusive relationship about 7 attempts before it actually managed to leave one. Um, you know, so there's obviously been a lot of research into this, and, you know, the idea of women's shelters and all that kind of thing. I think that, you know, works really well. But obviously, children who grow up in households with domestic violence are also victims of this domestic violence, whether they are, you know, whether the partner is being violent to them as well, or if they are just watching, you know, their other parent be abused by the other parent. And this is where I thought in the book that maybe it fell down a little bit for me, because I felt like like the impact that it was having on the children, I felt like we were understanding it maybe from the daughter's perspective, okay, but we didn't get into it too much. But there were sort of signs as to how it had, you know, affected her romantic life, and her willingness to be open with her family and other people. With regards to the son, I felt like it was very simplified. So there is like a section in this book. Sorry, I'll try not to do a spoiler, but essentially, you know, it's probably not a surprise, but, you know, he suffers, like, has an alcohol problem at a certain point in his life. And, you know, I feel like this is quite common for children who've been in abusive households. You know, so that was kind of like painted into the one personality, but he seemed to get over it pretty well and just in like one go. And it seemed a very simplified, oh, well, you know, my dad sort of act like this, so, you know, I've learned my lesson and I'm not going to do it. And I do think that when it comes to alcoholism, it's not a simple thing. It's like, you know, a domestic abuse victim trying to leave their partner, somebody trying to leave alcohol is, you know, an equally fraught relationship of going backwards and forwards more than once. And they don't tend to necessarily be taking into account the feelings of their family while they're undergoing this addiction. So I did think that that aspect of it was a bit simplified, especially because this author was going to so much length, I think, to talk about the impact on the mother of domestic abuse, and did that so well. I would have just liked her to just go that little bit further, I think. And given that this book, you kind of think that it's about the son when you get into it, and all the chapters and the different timelines like that we're in with the son, I that's why I felt like she could have been a little bit more uh, into the details with like how he was actually suffering from domestic abuse, and the effect that that was having on his life. So yeah, for me, I don't think that this book is necessarily about, you know, how your name can shape what other people think of you and what you think of yourself and your life. Like, there's a little bit of talk about that at the beginning, but in reality, I don't think that that's what this book is really getting into. I think that a name has been used as a catalyst, and then it's really about domestic violence and the effect that domestic violence can have on a person, and, you know, how they might grow up as a result, depending on how much exposure that they had had. So, you know, I didn't dislike this book. I thought that it was written nicely, and, you know, I was pulled in and I was enjoying it when I got about a third of the way through last week. But I was expecting it to go down a route that it just didn't really go down, and it didn't quite get there for me. So I have to admit, I am going to only rate this a 3 star, because based on, you know, all the reviews that I've read online that seem to think that this is, you know, the most amazing book from last year and everything, I actually would find this quite a hard book to recommend. For one, because it's about a very, very serious topic that a lot of people have trouble reading about, things like domestic abuse. Um, but also, yeah, it didn't really tick the boxes that I thought it was going to tick, from the synopsis, if I'm honest. And then there were certain details that I thought, you know, were not just not delved into quite enough, and they were like a little bit simplified. So yeah, I actually thought this was going to be somewhere between a 4 and a 5, but I'm actually going to rate this a 3 star. If you read this, let me know in the comments what you thought about it. I'd love to hear and have a conversation about that. Okay, so also last week I had started reading My Men by Victoria Kielland, which was a book that I think I said was released in 2021. Yeah, so 2021. And this has been translated from, I want to say, Norwegian or Swedish. But anyway, this, yeah, it's Norwegian. So this was released in the same year as a book called Triflers Need Not Apply, which was written by, well, the name of the lady escapes me, but I'll put the picture up on the screen so that you can see. But essentially, that was a really outstanding book about a serial killer called Belle Gunness, who had been in America, like in Chicago, around about the beginning of the 20th century. Now, this is basically on the same woman, and it's another fictionalised account of her life. Now, this is only 200 pages long, and I had got 50 pages in last week, and I said that it was absolutely nothing like Triflers Need Not Apply, and I wasn't really enjoying this. So I've managed to read another 50 pages, and I have to admit, I'm still not enjoying this. It's a stream of consciousness, so there's not really conversations going on between characters. This is all kind of happening in our character Belle's head. But it's a stream of consciousness, but it's also really rambly. Like, I feel like I can follow this better than somebody that doesn't know the story of kind of roughly what happened to Belle Sorensen, Belle Gunness. She's named a couple of things. And I know the story more or less from Triflers Need Not Apply. So in this rambly stream of consciousness, I can sort of keep up because I kind of know the timeline of when certain things are going to happen. But if you don't know anything about this woman, I should imagine that this makes absolutely no sense to you at all whatsoever. And, you know, there's a lot of metaphors and things in here that are really cheesy, and I'm just really not getting into it. But because it's not a very big book, I didn't want to do a DNF. I did want to try and read a little bit more of it. So now that I've read another 50 pages, our Belle, she has like moved from Norway into like America. She's in Chicago, I think. But I still don't think it's really kicked off properly yet as well, which is a bit weird because I say we're 50% through the book now. So considering what else needs to happen in the next 100 pages, I'm thinking that it's going to have to be really, really packed in. At the moment, it's been quite slow. So I'm still in two minds about this. Like, I feel like I want to struggle through a little bit more and at least get to the point where she actually commits a murder, because we're 100 pages in and she still hasn't yet, and she still has a fair bit to do. But at the same time, every time I open this, I feel like it's going to put me into a reading slump. So we've only got just over a week left of K is May, so I'll make a decision after I've read a couple of other things, like whether or not I'm going to struggle on with this, or I might do a DNF, but I'll decide to do the DNF at the end of the month, depending on if I've managed to get through any more of this. But this is just not impressing me so far. So After I'd finished with the names, I picked up The Briar Club by Kate Quinn. Now, I've never read anything by Kate Quinn before, but she is actually quite popular for a book called The Alice Network, and there's another one called The Rose Code. And I heard loads of people talking about those. And I do actually have those on my bookshelf to read because I thought the premise sounded really, really good. But I also had the Briar Club, and the Briar Club was just kind of like what I fancied. So this is like a thriller, historical fiction, murder type book. And I thought, do you know what? I kind of fancy a bit of crime. So this is like crime historical fiction. So I thought I would see like how this was done. So this was published in 2024, and as I understand it, Kate Quinn wrote this actually during the COVID pandemic. So this is her pandemic novel, and I was really, really, really impressed with this. As I said, having never read her stuff before. Now, I did kind of think that this was going to be along the same lines as Kate Morton's work, who also does really good historical fiction, because we've got that element of mystery in there. But I have to say, I think this is a little bit darker than Kate Morton. I would say that this is more closer to Barbara Kingsolver level of research. And I think also if you like Kristen Hanna, you might like this, but I do feel that this is like a little bit darker in a sense, but it's kind of sitting in that territory. So I just think like Kate Quinn actually just owns it herself, to be honest. But yeah, I'd probably say like she's closer to Barbara Kingsolver in a way, and Barbara Kingsolver was one of my favourite authors, so that's definitely a compliment. So there was lots of stuff to like about this book. So we start off in the 1950s, and what happens is a murder has happened, well, a double murder has happened in a boarding house, and it's a women's boarding house. But we don't know who has been murdered. So then the book goes into different chapters where we follow the lives of like 7 different women that live in this boarding house, and the last 4 years of their lives as they've sort of moved in, got to know each other, and the time that they've spent together. And I think, like, obviously in those chapters, it's kind of like opening up to the reader, like, who may have an enemy and who it is that might not like them, which of the other boarders they sort of get on with, so it's sort of suggestive. So you might try and work out who the dead bodies are, or who might have killed who, because we have absolutely no idea who the dead bodies are, or if anybody in the house actually committed the murders on the 2 bodies that may or may not be the 2 people in the house. So this, I felt, was everything that Women's Hotel by Daniel Lavery wasn't. So I had said with Women's Hotel that it was a fantastic idea to have all of these women like in a hotel together, and it's set about the same time as well, like in the 50s, because all the different personalities and things that you could have had going on and types of story, he could have had a really, really good, interesting story in that book, and he didn't. He just never really tied the characters together properly, and never really sort of did a centralised story that brought them all together, whereas this one does. So this one was really, really, really good. Really enjoyed that aspect of it. And we start off where basically, we've got this murder, but then we have our main central character, who is Grace. And I guess that the story, when it starts to go back 4 years into the future, it starts from when Grace moved into the boarding house. So it's kind of sort of told from her point of view, but in the other chapters we do get into the other character's point of view, but Grace is still like the main character, I would say. And essentially, when she moves into this boarding house, none of these women that live there really spend that much time together. There's not much community spirit in this house. And she kind of like drums that up. And every Thursday, she starts having people round her room and cooks them all dinner on a hot plate. And then over the years, they begin to learn about each other and their personalities come out. So there's like a character study, obviously, in each of these chapters, and I really enjoyed that. But the other thing that I thought was really unique about this book is that as the months go on, the weeks go on, the years or whatever, and the characters are all sort of sitting there cooking for each other, we actually have the recipe. I don't know if you can really see that, but we have like the recipe like, and the actual amounts for that recipe written in the book. And then we also have the method of how to make it in there. And I tell you what, as I've been going through, there's a couple, there's a jambalaya in here that sounds really, really nice. And also, uh, from the Bahamas, there's like a brown sugared banana recipe that sounds really nice as well. So I have to admit, I do feel like I want to go through this book and try and cook some of the recipes after. So, you know, in this book, you like getting historical fiction, crime, a bit of a whodunit thriller sort of thing. And you're also getting a recipe book, so there's like quite a lot going on in here. But yeah, I thought it was a really, really enjoyable read. I enjoyed the ending as well. I enjoyed all the character studies. The only thing that was a bit off-putting in this book is that it did have some mixed media. So it had like these postcards at the beginning of each chapter, which our main character Grace is sending to somebody called Kitty. And it's in the same way that it was done in the regulators. It's not typed, like it's written in a kind of handwriting, and it's really difficult to read. I really wish publishers, if they're going to publish like handwriting, they would do it in a really clear font, not like a thick font that's sort of written in a way where all the letters are really low and hard to distinguish from each other, and you can't tell whether, you know, you're looking at a U or undotted I's or what, you know. So I really dislike it when publishers do that, and this was a victim of that again. You know, I shouldn't. If you're going to put this kind of media in the book, you obviously want me to read it, so don't make it really difficult for me to read it, is all I'd say. So because of that, I'm going to give this a 4.5. The story in itself is very, very good. I thought the pacing was really good. I thought all of the characters were really, really good. I feel like the story that all of these characters are telling, you know, about the pasts and the countries that they've come from and how they've come to be in this house, it was all like absolutely really well researched and really astounding, and really some things to think about. So I learned some things, I think, as well, that I didn't know about America during the McCarthy period, things that happened in this book. So yeah, really educational, really good book, really, really good story. But please stop putting in written letters and postcards if you're not going to make the writing legible for people to read. Okay, so I had a little bit of time after that to begin a new book. So I wanted something completely different because I've read quite a lot of historical fiction, I think, this last month. And while I'm enjoying that, I just wanted something that was just totally different, totally off the wall, compared to what I've normally been reading. So I decided to go for My Dark Vanessa, which is Kate Elizabeth Russell. Now, I believe this is also her debut novel. So this was published, wait, no, it's published. Okay, so this was published in 2020, so not that long ago. And this has been doing the rounds on the internet through BookTube all of last year, and I did see a lot of posts on Reddit and Facebook of people reading this book, you know, and a lot of people are saying that it's a bit like Lolita. I don't know who wrote Lolita, but I'll put the book cover up on the screen and then you'll be able to see. Now, I've never read that, so I don't know, but I have a general idea of the story. So, you know, I was a bit apprehensive picking up this book, knowing that this is basically about, you know, a story where we have a minor, somebody who is underage, having sex with an adult who is far beyond her age, you know, because not really sort of sure if I'm going to read this book and then wish this is the book that I could unread, if I'm honest. Now, so far, I'm about a third of the way through. I've got just over 100 pages, and I think so far it's written really, really well. There are sex scenes in here written. Now, you'll know, like, I really don't like them getting into a sex scene in a book unless there's a specific good reason why it's there. And I would say in this book there's a good reason why it's there, because really what is surrounding the scene, I think, you know, which is the important bit to sort of, which I'm taking into account really, is the you know, the coercion between the older man to this young girl, to, you know, him doing what he's doing to her. And I think that it's been cleverly done so far, and I think you can just see how subtle this man's behaviour is, and how he's really getting, you know, under her skin and into her psyche and making her think that, you know, she's in control of the situation, when I'd say, you know, myself at nearly 40, I'm sort of looking at that thinking, no, you're not in control of the situation if you think he was, because he's definitely manipulating you. And there's definitely bits in this book where you just want to shout at Vanessa and be like, oh my God, like, no, get him away from her, get him away from her. But I kind of knew that that was going to happen in this book. So I can't review this fully, obviously, because I haven't finished yet. But so far, I'm enjoying the way that this is written. And I think that so far, I feel like the subject matter is being treated with respect as much as you can, given what the subject matter is in this book. So yeah, we'll get onto this. We'll finish reviewing it when I finish reading it in the next set of reviews. So I've actually only got one more, well, just over 1 week actually, isn't it? So it's like 9 days of May left to do K is May. So instead of having our weekly review next Friday, we'll do the weekly review a week Monday, because then that would be the actual end of May, and I'll finish reading everything that I'm going to read for K is May, so I can review it all together. So that means I get a slightly longer reading week. So if you're wondering what I might pick up after My Dark Vanessa, I'm very likely to pick up Home Seeking by Carissa Chen, which I'd picked up in Miami when I went on holiday, you know, probably about 2 months ago, because this is a book that I've seen recommended on YouTube by a couple of YouTubers as being one of the most outstanding books that they had read in that year. So I'm really keen to get into that, but as I understand that that is historical fiction. So I just, as I say, wanted to get into something else before I went back into historical fiction. And then, I'm really hoping out of the rest of this pile, I'll either have a chance to pick up the Barbara Kingsolver or the Kazuo Ishiguro that I have on this pile, because those two are like both some of my favourite authors. So I know that I'm going to finish the month off really strong if I finish with one of their books, because I really loved reading every single one of their books that I've read so far. So yeah, let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of the books that I have reviewed this week and what you think about them. I'm especially keen to understand if you've read the names and what you actually thought of the story, and how you interpreted, like did you agree with my sort of comments on it, or would you look at it in a different way? So yeah, thank you for watching this video. Once again, I've really enjoyed making it, and I've had a really good reading week, and I've enjoyed all of the books that I've been reading, apart from The Men by Victoria, Kielland. But we'll see where that one goes. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, please press the thumbs up, and if you'd like to see my future content, please press the subscribe button. I will do a video next week, but there won't be a review video on the books that I'm reading now. It will just be a different kind of video. I don't know what it's going to be about yet, but yeah, I'll probably start next week, and then we'll have the final reviews a week Monday for K is May. Thanks for watching. Bye!